Zertelo and the Quest for CastleOak by D.S. Arnauld. Read for you by the author. Chapter 1. A Growing Shadow. Alone the owl soared over the tree line of the Crescent Valley in open challenge of CastleOak. The old tree's branches, bare and ugly, pierced the canopy of swaying green leaves. The rotten tree proclaimed the dark times in the forest under the rule of the tyrant who lived there. It pained old Arnauld when he remembered what CastleOak had once been. Few of his fellow guardians still believed their old civilization could be restored. And yet he flew north toward CastleOak, testing the limits of his nerve with each beat of his wings. If I could draw out Belfar, thought old Arnauld, if I could end the tyranny alone without risking all the creatures in a horrible war. The sound of the hawk's cry was sudden. It carried on the wind with a deadly chill. Instantly, old Arnauld began climbing to battle height. He could not look back. He pushed his old wings harder than he had in years, knowing somewhere behind him the hawk was rising to answer the challenge. A shadow streaked through the owl's vision. No longer golden, Belfar's feathers had tarnished and become black. Old Arnauld saw the bird of prey turn toward him. How different he looked from the radiant hawk who had saved the forest from the wolf invasion. High in the air, the two warriors turned to fight. The shock of their collision threw them both into a dangerous downward spiral. Tangled in the hawk's enormous wingspan, old Arnauld fought to break free, to climb back into the sky. Talons, long bony knives, clawed at his eyes. Pain seared through him as one talon caught the owl under the chin. The top of CastleOak flipped by. A twisted white branch barely missed the two falling rivals. Old Arnauld sensed the ground rushing up to break his body. With a desperate thrust, his beak found its way through the hawk's thick feather guard and drew blood. Suddenly, the hawk let go. Old Arnauld was free. He stretched out his wings and thrashed them together just in time to stop the course of his fall. Belfar raced high into the clouds, and the owl recognized the strategy of a mighty dive to cut down one's opponent. Old Arnauld hovered over CastleOak, shouting up at the climbing hawk. "You were great once, Belfar!" cried the owl. "Must it be war?" The hawk reached its zenith, and for a moment time stopped as the great bird hung suspended in the air. Then Belfar turned and aimed his black beak straight at the owl's heart. Reluctantly, the owl began his retreat. Blood was flowing heavily from his wound. He needed what strength he had left to reach the others with this news. But at least he was not the only one who would carry a reminder of this day. Old Arnauld smiled, knowing that the old hawk could still be wounded after all. At long last, Ratjard, the southern clan leader, had won an audience with the Lord Hawk. Yet even as the greatest opportunity of his life approached, his thoughts scampered about with ominous fears. Though strangers, the other great rats greeted him by name. Word had spread they needed his clan badly. They finally had no choice but to advance him. He and dozens of other rats waited in an antechamber off the Grand Council Hall at the heart of CastleOak, where representatives of animal species had met for 1,000 years. The origin of the vast room inside the tree had itself become ancient myth. Ratjard wondered what he might find there in the next room. The antechamber was dark and dusty. Natural wood of its archways had crumbled into ashy piles. The floor was rotted through in places, so that seasoned rats knew where to leap. Too often a politician had fallen through, or been pushed. Ratjard shifted his eyes about, trying to keep track of them all. It was impossible. Rats slipped from shadow to shadow, speaking in hushed whispers, pointing conspiratorial stares at one another. He moved slowly back toward the entryway of the Grand Council Hall. Just as he caught a glimpse of the intricate dome-shaped auditorium, lit with thin slashes of light from tiny cracks opening somewhere in the void, he felt a firm paw take his shoulder. Ratjard spun about. "Dakrat, you surprised me." "Trying to catch a glance of the Lord Hawk's entrance?" Dakrat winked knowingly. "Not a wise thing to do, old friend." "But surely that isn't a secret," Ratjard said, allowing himself to be led away into a dark corner of the antechamber. "Belfar will be in attendance, will he not?" "So many questions," frowned Dakrat. "Not wise. No, not at all. The rat leaned forward until his snout almost touched Ratjard's. Inside CastleOak, everything is a secret. Then I value your advice, replied Ratjard, playing the game equal to the most cunning of rats. When my southern clan has joined with the Lord Hawk's army, our western cousins will once again be our strongest allies. Perhaps, shrugged Dakrat indifferently. Perhaps. All the votes have yet to be cast. Ratjard glanced back at the entry to the Grand Council Hall, and then recognition struck. The votes were won or lost out here in the shadows, long before the smallest issue was brought into the Grand Hall. Ratjard smiled. He could play this game too. At long last, the Lord Hawk will have troops inside the Guardian's last stronghold, the Sanctuary of Forgotten Meadow, he said. You need my clan. We could invade Forgotten Meadow and eradicate your entire southern clan as traitors, threatened Dakrat angrily. Not without killing countless rats on both sides, countered Ratjard quickly. Neither side can afford a civil war. I want a permanent seat here, an hereditary title to... You're Jesus rotten, cursed Dakrat. No rat wins such an honor so quickly. No rat before me has had so much to offer. But even as he said the words, Ratjard felt a wicked pleasure warm under his fur, for when he said offer, he meant threaten. My clan is larger than you could dream, Dakrat. Why, I myself have 40 sons ready to attack where I will. 40, breathed Dakrat, hardly able to say the number, let alone believe it. A noise of commotion interrupted the dark conversation. The Lord Hawk had entered the Grand Council Hall, and the rats were climbing over each other to get in line. Yes, that's right, answered Ratjard, this time placing his heavy paw on the other rat's shoulder while leading him through the antechamber. 40 at last count. When all 7 guardians had gathered on the balcony of the mountain owlery, they waited respectfully for the chief owl to go in first. Old Aladon swiveled his head about, counting them, then twitched suddenly, tucked in his bronze feathers, and slipped into the small dark door. In the dim gloom of the cave, the owls formed a solemn circle. Only their eyes glowed as of flaming amber jewels, their night vision taking over the instant they entered. Old Aladon began the meeting without the usual ceremonies. The time has come to make a decision, said the owl in a gruff voice. Aladon, you're wounded, cried young Hopple, seeing the blackened blood against the shadow of the secret room. I have met with Belfar in the sky today. A tense silence followed. There will be no peace. We must act soon, old Aladon said, looking around the circle. And you all know what I think and where it must begin. There are no knights, the steely gray owl Erlon insisted angrily. His stripe is almost its brightest blue, snapped the chief owl. How often have each of us flown over Forgotten Meadow, secretly hoping one had returned to us? The lizard Zertelo must be told who he is and begin the road of trials. He must face the 3 tests. Erlon rose up on his talons in protest. A knight returning to the forest would only stir up trouble and make Belfar's cruelty worse. Do you call that justice, old Aladon, to send him alone against the tyrant when Belfar's the one who hunted down all the knights? Ithlo closed her eyes and said dreamily, Telling the lizard the truth about who he is would start a great change in the forest. Slow at first, and like the pebble that sends a ripple across the surface of a lake. The gray owl scoffed, ever impatient with her constant metaphors. This is a fool's quest, said Erlon. The wizards are scattered, so comfortable in their ancient swamps you can barely tell them from other frogs. All the members of the Council of Animals have died except for the muskrat Degilu, and there are no knights. What would you have us do, Erlon? Demanded the white owl Owleth. Accept the tyrant's rule? Pretend that CastleOak was never a symbol of justice and hope to the forest? Never, and well you know it, said Erlon. Enough, shouted old Aladon. We must be of one mind. This division is what destroyed the council and caused so many knights to throw away their lives. The chief owl closed his eyes. One at a time, the others followed. Owleth waited for Erlon to reluctantly close his eyes. Then she was the last to join the circle. An eerie stillness slowly crept over the cave as the guardians truly became of one mind. "We listen to the quiet voice within our hearts," began Ithel in her enchanting voice. "Inside, we know the creatures of the forest deserve to be free, and the little lizard deserves the chance to prove his courage." Zertelo awoke in the hollow log where he lived. He yawned, stretched his back, and uncurled his long blue tail. Bright sunlight was already streaming in from his door, and suddenly Zertelo felt he was supposed to be doing something. He had overslept again, but then he remembered he didn't have anywhere to be. The lizard strode out onto his front porch, the large flat sunning stone, munched on some leaves, and thought about taking a nap. The sun felt warm, and he could see the world and the day go by around him. The lizard stared at the trees of the forest and wondered what life was like in that big wild place. Though he had never ventured into it, he was always eager for news about what was going on there. Zertelo began to wonder about his blue stripe. Less than a month ago, he had noticed the change in his green skin. Every day the stripe seemed to grow a brighter shade of blue. But why? No sooner had the question formed than he saw a bronze-speckled owl gliding toward him from the blue sky above. "Ol Aladon!" Zertelo cheered. "What brings you to Forgotten Meadow?" "I have come to start you on your journey, Zertelo," said Ol Aladon. "You know who I am?" asked Zertelo, a little surprised and more than a little bit flattered. "The question is, do you know who you are?" answered old Aladon, ruffling his feathers. Then the chief owl spread his wings as far out as they would go, threw back his head, and called out with a loud voice, "Arise! Courage! The danger is near! Arise, Zertelo! The forest needs you! Arise, and begin your great adventure!" "An adventure?" cried the lizard, jumping up and spinning in a circle, his tail dancing in a graceful arch behind him. "Yes, you have the mark of courage, the blue stripe which runs from your back to the tip of your tail, and all lizards with blue stripes are knights." "Me? A knight?" Zertelo was amazed. I'd begun to hope when the stripe first showed, but did knights really exist? I almost went looking for Crazy Crogrog because all frogs are wizards. They say he lives near the creek, but I've never met him. "No," interrupted old Aladon irritably. "Not all frogs are wizards, and not all wizards are good. How have you lived on the edge of the forest for so long without knowing this? Crogrog is a wise wizard, and you would be lucky to ever find him, for you must face many dangers and challenges. On your way to becoming a knight, you must face the 3 tests." "But I've never left Forgotten Meadow. Where will my journey take me?" asked Zertelo. Old Aladon's face grew stern. He planted his talons firmly on the ground and looked Zertelo in the eye. "You must pass through the forest to find the tree of CastleOak. There you will aid us in the fight against Belfar, for his wings cast a shadow over much of the forest. Signs point to a return of the dark times. Many creatures who were becoming friendly are sliding back into evil. Bats and spiders do his bidding. Others will follow. Dark times are coming, unless a knight is found to protect the light of the forest." Those immense eyes looked into Zertelo, and the desire to do great deeds awoke in his heart. But as the owl lowered his wings, Zertelo's courage quickly faded. Could I, stammered Zertelo, could I really be a knight?" Old Aladon's eyebrows drew together in deep concentration. He seemed to be seriously weighing both the doubt and the ambition behind Zertelo's question. He said simply, "Go on." "I did not choose to have a blue stripe," answered Zertelo. "No, just as you did not choose to have the potential inside you, but what you do with it is your choice. Your stripe does not make you a knight, Zertelo. You must become one." "But I don't even have a sword." You have only to begin the first step of your journey, and you will find that which you need along the way. Chapter 2. Choosing Sides. At once Zertelo set off, but then he turned and looked back at his log and rock. The lizard was sad to be leaving his home. "Who will look after my house while I am gone?" he asked old Alladon. "It will be fine while you are away. Indeed, your quest will be the only way to keep it safe." "I don't understand." "Unless you confront danger, danger will come to you. Belfar's reign will stretch even to Forgotten Meadow. You have only just set off in time." "Aren't you coming along?" "I have other errands to which I must attend. There are things you can do on the ground that owls cannot. To point, your most urgent task will be finding the last remaining counselor, a very important muskrat named Digilu. Secretly, he is working to spread the idea of freedom among the animals. Help him, Zertelo. Find Counselor Digilu and help him. Now we too must summon our courage. Both you and I have jobs to do. So to the air go I, and to the forest go you." With the rush of feathers and wings, old Alladon climbed swiftly into the sky, and Zertelo chose a course leading north out of Forgotten Meadow. A few minutes later, Zertelo knocked on the archway of his best friend Radard's burrow to tell him the news. As unfortunate a name as this was for a young rat, Radard's brothers had even worse names, including Ratpard, Ratnard, Ratlard, and so on, for he had too many brothers for anyone to remember them all. Even his mother confused them when several were acting up or the lot was fighting together in a brawl. Every one of these names was derived from their father's name, Ratjard. Still, in Zertelo's opinion, of all Radard's brothers, the worst name had to be Ratfard. Soon Zertelo could hear the muffled scratching noise of rat claws climbing up from the underground burrow, and Radard scampered out onto the grassy hillside. "Got something to tell you," both said at the same time. When they finished laughing, Radard said, "You go first." Zertelo extended his claw courteously. "I insist." "My father is back from his secret mission," Radard exclaimed excitedly. "Secret mission?" gasped Zertelo. Radard nodded darkly and grabbed Zertelo's claw to pull him into the tunnel. It twisted and descended to the main family room. Zertelo had to wait a moment for his eyes to adjust to the dingy light. In the middle of the room sat the high-ranking Ratjard, with over a dozen of his sons scampering at his feet. Radard joined his brothers on the outer circle, pushing his way closer so he and Zertelo could hear. "I've just come from speaking with the Lord Hawk himself," said Ratjard. "Lord Belfar has asked the rats to join his army." A hush fell over the room, and the young rats slowly began to murmur among themselves in small groups. Zertelo sat in silence. He felt the old rat's words close around him and dared not speak of his quest. Not now, not even to Radard. He would have to wait until they were outside and alone together to pass on what old Alladon had said about his blue stripe. Suddenly the burrow seemed too small, dangerous, buried under too much dirt, too smelly, confining, a trap he needed to get out of badly. "That is where a young fighter needs to go and earn respect," continued Ratjard. "Plenty of young rats are joining Belfar's army. He needs all he can get. That's why the bats have me recruiting." "I'll join, father!" Shocked, Zertelo jerked his head up to stare at Radard. "You?" scoffed Ratjard. "Your brother's more likely. Belfar needs the right sort, if you know what I mean. Fighters. Rats who are merciless, forceful, and most of all willing to follow orders without the slightest hesitation. I promised to get Lord Belfar all the rats in the meadow. We are an alliance now. If Lord Hawk goes to war, we stand with him." Ratfard slapped Radard across the back of his head. "No need for you to apply, little pest." A fight between two rat brothers usually led to a scrapping mob. Zertelo could see this time would be no different. Radard pushed Ratfard into Ratnard, who scrambled to get on top of the pile of quarreling brothers. Ratlard pummeled Ratfard with two viciously well-aimed fists and a headbutt. Knowing he was no match for his bigger brothers, Radard slipped through the tunnel and out to the slope of grass, where they could not see him crying. Zertelo followed, standing quietly by his friend. "Father never even—" Radard brushed his paw across the wet fur of his cheeks, trying his best to straighten his face. "He never notices anything I do unless I do it wrong. I'll make him see what I'm worth. I'll show my brothers. Someday they'll obey me, and everyone'll see them carrying out my orders." Zertelo put his arm around Radard's shoulder. "Why don't you come with me, Radard? Think what a team we could make, you and me together." "What? With you where?" "That's what I've come to tell you. I'm going to be a knight." "What are you talking about?" asked Radard with a look of disbelief. "Old Aladon himself visited me this morning and told me what my blue stripe means. I'm going to cross into the forest and face the 3 tests and help the guardians and find the last counselor and meet wizards," cried Zertelo. "Why don't you come with me?" "Father says knights are myths. Those are just stories, Zertelo." Radard frowned, glancing over his shoulder to the open burrow. "You heard, Father. Joining Belfar's army is the only way to get anywhere. To climb in rank is the only way to prove myself to my brothers and to Father." "But Belfar is—" Zertelo could only think of one word. "Bad. I'm on my way to find Counselor Degilu and help old Aladon overthrow Belfar's tyranny." Radard shook his head. "You've always been a dreamer, Zertelo. Belfar can't be stopped. He's the one who drove off the northern wolves. Lord Belfar keeps us safe from another invasion. Without him, the whole forest would be in danger. I'm going to join, like my brothers." "Then we would be on opposite sides," exclaimed Zertelo. "When I'm a knight—" "You won't become a knight," interrupted Radard. "You're afraid of water. You won't even cross the tiny creek at the bottom of the ravine. A knight who's afraid of water." "That was a secret," Zertelo whispered. "I trusted you." "Or who ever heard of a knight who's scared of war?" teased Radard. Zertelo's expression hardened. "In that, neither of us has been tested. But I will be. I'm going to face the 3 tests." "What 3 tests?" asked Radard. Zertelo didn't answer. "You mean you don't even know?" Radard smiled wickedly, seeing Zertelo's embarrassment. "Zertelo, someday you'll wake up and see Lord Belfar's army coming for you, and I'll be at the head. I'll be higher in rank than my brothers, even higher than Father." Zertelo saw Radard's paw clench and open, a sure sign that he was working up to punch one of his brothers. Zertelo stepped back. This time Radard's fist threatened him. To Zertelo's horror and disappointment, Radard, his truest friend, was choosing to become his enemy right before his eyes. As much as it hurt, he knew what he had to do. "Goodbye, Radard." Zertelo swallowed the lump in his throat. "You were my best friend. I'm sorry it has to end this way. If leading Belfar's army is your only goal, then I hope it doesn't come true." "I will become strong," began Radard angrily as Zertelo turned to leave. The lizard jogged into the small trees on the border of the forest and passed beyond the boundary of the only world he had ever known. He did not look back at Forgotten Meadow, but as he made his way toward the ravine, Zertelo could still hear his friend Radard shouting in the distance. "I'll show them all how much stronger I am. You'll see, Zertelo. Someday, I'll be stronger than anyone." Chapter 3. Bard at the Bridge. Ahead lay the forest. Before he entered, Zertelo stood on the edge of the homely clearing, listening to the creaking and whispering of the thick wood. He could smell the old moss and dank mold. As he walked into the trees, the lizard felt excited to explore new places and meet magical creatures. He thought about what it would mean to be a knight. Zertelo realized that he didn't know. Between the lizard and the forest stretched a deep ravine with steep muddy walls and large rocks at the bottom. Only a small trickle of water flowed in its stream. The wide trunk of a fallen tree made a bridge across the creek to the green stones on the far side. A fierce-looking thorny lizard stood guarding the bridge, barring Zertelo's way. Large horns rose to sharp points above its eyes and ran down its spine, covering its entire tail. The sentinel was pale orange, save the tips of his horns, which faded to the color of jagged white bones. It looked to Zertelo like a walking thorn bush. In its claws was a long black fighting staff. Cautiously, Zertelo approached. Just as he was about to step onto the bridge, the thorny lizard gave his challenge. "I am Vodbiad, keeper of the bridge. If you wish to enter the forest, you must best me in single combat," demanded the thorny lizard. Zertelo looked up and down the creek. There was no other bridge in sight, no other way to cross, so he took a step forward. "To step onto the bridge is to openly accept the challenge," declared Vodbiad. "I do not want to fight you," began Zertelo, unsure how to proceed. "Please, sir, I'm on a quest to reach CastleOak. Please let me pass." "I can only yield to one ready to face the trials of the forest." Vodbiad planted his feet under his spiked shoulders, assuming a fighting stance. He looked even more solid and intimidating. Slowly, he began to turn the fighting staff in front of him, first with one claw, then the other. Vodbiad spun the staff faster until it became a dangerous blur, showing his mastery of the weapon. With a final flourish, Vodbiad brought one end of the staff down with a forceful thud onto the tree trunk of the bridge. "How can I believe you will do what you say?" asked Zertelo. "My word is my honor. Now prove you are ready for the dangers of the forest." Zertelo foolishly charged onto the tree trunk. Vodbiad waited until Zertelo was close and deftly swung the black fighting staff under his blue tail. Zertelo slipped sideways and fell. Vodbiad slammed his staff down hard on Zertelo's tail, pinning him upside down where he hung over the edge of the bridge. Vodbiad peered over the edge of the log to ask, "How can you make your way through the forest if you cannot even cross this bridge? Go home. The forest is too big for you." At this moment, Zertelo was met with the single most horrible event in his life. His blue tail suddenly snapped off, sending him headlong toward the bottom of the ravine far below. Chapter 4. In the House of Purple Light. Zertelo feared this was the end of his tale. Rocks, and more terrifying to Zertelo, water, rushed to meet him at a frightening speed. Everything had gone so badly. The horned lizard had proved he was unprepared. Radard had been right. He would never become a knight. He braced himself against the coming impact, yet found his fall broken by something soft and squishy and purple. He rolled on his side and found himself on a sea of purple mushrooms. They were everywhere. Now Zertelo found he had a new problem. How would he get down from this icky mushroom patch? A strange voice croaked from under him.
Patience, young sir. Relax, and they will let you down safely."
Zertelo did as he was told. He lay still and wondered who was talking to him. Then he heard words that could only be magic.
Shroomroo, Lumwoo, Shroomroo.
Suddenly his back began sinking into a gap between two purple mushrooms. His arms and legs squeezed through, along with the pitiful stub where his tail used to be. Zertelo floated softly to the ground. There he saw an aged frog, plump as a ball, covered with bumps and warts, and in places wet sticky ooze glistening in 100 shades of green, hop-walking toward him.
Well, hello. I thought you might be dropping in soon,
the frog croaked happily.
My name is Krogrog. Welcome to my home.
Krogrog waved his long, sticky fingers to the mushrooms above, and they began to give off a faint purple glow. But Zertelo barely noticed the eerie twilight of the wizard's sanctuary. A dull pain throbbed in his bottom. He rubbed at the stump, whimpering, "My tail! My poor tail!"
"It will grow back,"
Krogrog reassured him.
"Now, drink this and get some rest."
The frog handed him a goblet of foaming bubbles, which had suddenly appeared in the frog's sticky fingers. Zertelo drank the delicious draught, growing sleepier with every gulp. If he hadn't passed out with the last sip, he would have seen the goblet disappear before it could fall to the ground. Zertelo slept for a long time. In his dreams, he heard the strange croaking voice of the kindly frog singing, and other nonsense to the mushroom house. At times he thought he heard a voice that sang back from the purple glow. When he awoke, Krogrog was setting out another goblet of bubbling draught. What is this? He was surprised how hungry sleeping had made him.
Cricket juice,
said Krogrog. I've had cricket juice, Zertelo smacked his lips happily, but none this good.
Thank you. How is your tail this morning?
Zertelo's mood fell. It still hurts. I guess I wasn't ready after all.
Do you remember much of the fight?
I remember everything that happened, Zertelo admitted. He kept the details of Oddbjod's taunts to himself. The frog's eyes brightened.
Good. That means you can learn from your mistakes. Now, tell me, what did you think of old Aladon?
He is very noble. I bet he can be fierce when he wants to be. I'm glad he is on our side. Honestly, if an owl as strong as old Aladon can't stop Belfar the tyrant, I don't know who can. Wait, how did you know I'd met him? Krogrog winked at Zertelo.
Guardians are very serious about protecting the forest. But then, owls are serious about everything. Too serious sometimes, if you ask me. Because he is the chief guardian, old Aladon is the most serious owl of all.
Krogrog scratched his bumpy head.
Or is he chief guardian because he's the most serious of owls? I wonder.
The old frog muttered on, but Zertelo interrupted. Was he serious about my becoming a knight?
Patience, my dear lizard. It will take many days for your tail to grow back. There is time for all of your questions.
But I have so many. Are you really a wizard? How do you know about the guardians? Is magic what makes my tail grow back?
Yes, my little friend. I am a wizard. We work with the guardians and the knights, although there haven't been knights for a long time. And yes, magic will make your tail grow back, a special kind given only to lizards.
Will magic make me a knight?
No, said Krogrog, trying to let the lizard down gently. I can see you are disappointed, Zertelo, but you must train your body to fight and your mind to know why. Your role is not to use magic, but to protect it.
What is magic? Where does it come from?
From all the good in the life of the forest that can ever be known or hoped for.
But I have heard of terrible creatures using magic to harm animals. Frightening magic, dark magic. Zertelo couldn't help but shudder saying the words. Where does it come from?
The dark magic draws from cruelty and self-doubt,
explained the old frog. Zertelo wanted to understand the deep words he had just heard. Could something so powerful be so easy to grasp? And so Belfar corrupted CastleOak?
At one time, CastleOak was more than just the seat of power at the center of the forest. It was a place where all creatures knew they could go to work out their problems, a place where the council offered justice, the wizards sought wisdom, and the guardians and knights served with courage to protect the light of the forest. Oh yes, said Krogrog, CastleOak was more than just the center of the forest. It was its heart.
I wish the animals could see those virtues once more, said Zertelo. The wizard nodded and smiled approvingly.
And do you want to show them?
I want them to see those virtues in themselves, answered Zertelo firmly. I believe they can. Krogrog rose up on his back legs and declared,
You have passed the first test, the test of mind.
Suddenly, a blue flash of blinding light leapt out from the wizard's hand. Zertelo shielded his eyes. The wizard swung the light back and forth until it became a solid silver line with a golden hilt. The sword only stayed still for a moment in Krogrog's hand. It went up and down and around and behind the frog's round body, moving quicker than one would expect his little arms to be capable of. Apparently, the wizard could fight with more than just spells and potions.
"Take the sword,"
Krog said, offering the golden hilt to the lizard.
"The knight to whom it belonged gave his life, serving the light of the forest,"
said Krog. A faraway look came into the wizard's eyes, as if seeing a memory both sad and important. Zertelo looked into the polished blade and saw his reflection looking back at him. Only there was something different about the Zertelo gazing out from the weapon. Something around the eyes, stern and yet peaceful. Zertelo realized this was the image of himself as a knight. He saw the lizard and the sword were one, yet different, and the mystery overwhelmed him. He tried to remember where he was and why he had come here.
"The lizard who last wielded this sword died for what he believed."
"What did he believe?" asked Zertelo reverently.
"That all life has meaning, Zertelo, from its beginning to its end."
Chapter 5. Sharpening Sword and Mind. From that day on, Krog the frog became Zertelo's mentor. The lizard was accustomed to doing whatever he wanted all day, eating when he wanted, sleeping when he wanted, and playing when he wanted. But training to be a knight was work, hard work. After a particularly long lecture about courtesy and manners, which Zertelo found unbearably boring, the first lesson in swordplay began. Krog faced Zertelo with a wooden stick. Without his tail to counterbalance his movement, Zertelo didn't see how he could ever learn to sword fight. His teacher seemed to know what the lizard was thinking. He gave a wry smile, bowed his fat round body, and instructed,
"Bow to your opponent, Zertelo. Good. Now, weren't all those hours spent on manners worth it?"
The frog began to circle, surprisingly limber and quick despite his appearance.
"Sword up to the ready, Zertelo. Higher, higher. Good. Now try to strike me."
Zertelo lunged. Krog parried, spun, and jumped clear over Zertelo's head. "That's not fair," cried Zertelo. "You can jump farther than I can because you are a frog."
"Should I complain that you are smaller, more flexible, and more agile? And what's more, you have a sword, and I only have a stick."
His words weren't meant as an insult, but they still stung. Zertelo brought his sword up to the ready for another go. The fat old frog deflected the attack as easily as the first time. "What am I doing wrong?"
"Watch your opponent's weapon,"
Krog suggested. Zertelo lost the third round, too.
"Keep your eye on your opponent. Ignore everything else,"
Krog encouraged. Zertelo tried just watching his teacher, but the results were the same.
"Pay attention to your environment. Use the roots, vines, and rocks to your advantage,"
Krog instructed. Zertelo's shoulders drooped in frustration. "How am I supposed to watch your weapon, ignore everything but you, and pay attention to the environment all at the same time?" Krog closed his eyes.
"You have to see through more than just your eyes. See through your hands holding the sword. See through your feet as they read the ground. See through your mind as you become aware of what is happening. See through your opponent's point of view and know what he will do next. See through time and understand what led to the fight and what will be the consequences."
Zertelo didn't think he could do all of that. He closed his eyes as his teacher had and tried to imagine himself moving through space perfectly. When he opened his eyes, Krog already had his stick up to the ready position. Zertelo watched him carefully. He envisioned swinging the sword up to block Krog's downward strike, and then a warm vibration in his shoulders and a tingling in his claws told him it had really happened. Krog's stick was braced against the sword because Zertelo had brought the blade up at just the right time. "I bet he will hop over me again," thought Zertelo. "That's what I'd do." And so Krog did. At the height of his leap, the frog twisted midair and struck at the lizard. Zertelo was ready. He spun around and set his feet wide to be low for Krog's high attack. Sword clashed with stick and smashed the wood in two. Though defeated, the frog was not at all disappointed. He beamed with pride and sang a few ribbits despite himself.
Well done! Well done!
Thank you, Krogrog, Zertelo said, and quickly looked away. He was excited and wanted to say more, but the words would not come. A new emotion swelled in his chest and up into his throat. He didn't know what it was called, but he knew it came from Krogrog's believing in him. It felt good to know his mentor had his best interest at heart.
Yes, I think we have both earned a nice goblet of cricket juice. Now, where did I put those goblets? Oh, yes, here they are.
The only thing more magical than their sudden appearance was the taste of their content.
Listen,
said Krogrog as they sat on the edge of a rock shelf overlooking the ravine. Zertelo could see the tops of the mushroom house, their luminous glow dimmed in the absence of their master. The sun was setting behind the forest. A star appeared, and just then he heard it. First one voice, then another began to sing. Crickets, frogs, and birds each sang their part of the melody, adding a little of their magic. Why do they sing? Asked Zertelo.
Because Belfar cannot tell them who they are. The creatures of the forest are strong, but they will need you, Zertelo.
I don't know if I'm ready yet.
Your tail is growing nicely. When others see your blue stripe, they must believe they can depend on you.
How did it come to me? Why did I grow into the stripe?
Even I don't know the answer to those questions, my dear lizard. But we must restore the forest to what it once was. That I do know.
The frog's old voice had lost its croaky roughness as he spoke. It had taken on a warm flow of the best summer days, when everything seems good and freedom shines everywhere. What will be my part in restoring the forest? Asked Zertelo.
The road ahead of a knight is a road of trials. His task is never done. No matter how many victories are won, or how much valor is shown, someone will always need your help. You will always be needed to face dangers so that others can be free. The true calling of a knight is to seek peace even while confronting great peril. A knight must find peace inside, even when he must fight.
I didn't know it would be so hard.
As long as you serve the light of the forest, help will come when you need it most, usually in ways you least expect. Through peace, we come to respect one another and find common ways of seeing what is good.
Like CastleOak, shouted Zertelo. Every time I have felt down, thinking of the great tree has brought me back up. When I feel low, all I have to do is wish to see it and my spirit is lifted.
Do you know why, Zertelo? Asked Krogrog.
No, Zertelo lowered his eyes. He was having a hard time meeting his teacher's gaze. I've never questioned it.
Perhaps if your quest is true, you will find more than glory and titles. Perhaps you will find the meaning of the old symbol of the forest, and so understand more about the world, and about yourself.
Then will I be a knight?
To prove a knight's virtue, the founders of CastleOak set 3 tests of mind, heart, and spirit. You passed the first when you understood the need for the animals to see their virtue. You will pass the others when your understanding has grown.
I thought my skill with a sword would be the test. I thought my abilities would inspire other animals to follow me. Krogrog looked tired. He stared hard at Zertelo and, with a voice grim and stern, said,
Your abilities allow you to lead, but it is where you lead your fellow creatures that will make you great.